Hey everyone, it's another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. And today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that's podcast guesting, because we are talking to Noemi Beres, the co owner of Podcast Connections, which is a podcast booking agency. But we're going to talk about kind of like a different angle, what a lot of people don't really dive into, and that is the research that you should do ahead of time before you guest on a show, which is so important, right? And welcome to the show, Noemi.
Thank you so much for having me today, Lindsay. It's an absolute honor.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like people sometimes think, oh, like a show is a show is a show is a show. But doing that research ahead of time really it makes a difference.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. You really have to take your time and invest time in researching the right podcast for you. You have to, first
Yeah.
of all, you have to figure out a niche. I mean, that's just so important. You have to be in the right niche to find the right podcast. And that also means that you have to listen to a couple of episodes before you go for that specific podcast. And I know some people, they just don't do it.
Mhm.
But just to get the host and the show's vibe, it's really important to listen to at least one episode or two episodes if you have time for that.
Agreed. Do you believe in like the pre-chat? I've had a few of those, and sometimes they're helpful, and sometimes I find they're not.
It's always a tricky question for a podcast
I
booking agent
know.
because for us it creates more work because basically
Agreed.
you're booking two different interviews and but having said that, I think it's still very valuable for many people because it's like you just connect with someone and you get their vibe. You talk
Mhm.
for like 10 minutes. If it's only 10 minutes, I think it's still beneficial for both
Yeah.
parties because you get to know each other better. And then when you meet on the show, you're not like two complete strangers who never met before. And I can see I'm doing podcast guesting too because proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
So, and I had a couple of people I never met before. And it was a bit strange just to get on the call with them because I never met them.
Yeah.
And it was so much, it was a different vibe. Obviously for me it's a bit different because I know the host I work with, so they kind of know me, so it's just easier. But I would say 80% of the hosts I wouldn't say 80, but like 60% would love to get on a pre-call before the interview and just get to know each other.
Yeah. I find when I'm like on the fence or if I'm doing a pod swap,
Mm,
then it's like, okay, it's beneficial to be like, okay, what do you want to talk about on my show? What am I going to talk about on your
right.
show? That kind of thing. And just to kind of like get a feel. I find that, yeah, super beneficial. But you're so right. Sometimes it's like, who has time for that many meetings? Now,
Yeah.
so what do you coach your clients to do? Like, what kind of research? Like, what are you looking for?
First of all, you have to find your niche, as I mentioned. So you figure out who are your listeners or where your potential clients can come from. So that's really important to figure out. And it's also important to know that not every podcast interview will result in a new client because it won't happen because podcast guesting is as everyone knows, it's a long-term marketing strategy. It's
Mhm.
not going to happen overnight. You have to rinse and repeat those interviews, and you have to do it a couple of times until you get the requested result. But the research, when it comes to research, obviously iTunes is there. Listen Notes, is your good friend. So if you check out those two places and you just try to type in like a search term that is, or different search terms that apply to your business or your coaching program or whatever you do, and start to just, going down on that rabbit hole of iTunes or Listen Notes, because it will help you. Because once you find one, you will find the related ones on the bottom, and then you can start to research those too. So, and it's also a gateway to have like a worksheet or an Excel sheet, a Google worksheet or an Excel sheet, and just try to, make a note of those podcasts that you are interested in. And then you try to get all the information about them as much as you can. And no, you don't need always a podcast agent to do that. If you have the time and energy, a lot of time, You can do that for yourself if you want to save the time and money and energy. Like,
Yes.
you can hire someone to do that for you, but not everybody has that. So yeah, you can do that by yourself for sure.
So that's figuring out what shows might be suitable.
Yeah.
So let's say that someone invited you onto their show. So what should you look at to say, yes, that's for me?
It's important to figure out everything beforehand because it's evergreen content and it will stay in Google forever when someone, search your name. So does it align whatever message the podcast host has with your business and with you? I mean, it's really, really important. And because it stays there forever, you can't really be on shows that doesn't help to build your authority or build your business. Because some people say, yeah, I can be as many shows I want. I can be shows with 5 episodes, with 10 episodes. Yeah, you can do that, but maybe they don't support your business and they won't help you with the real podcast guesting experience. If you just go for quantity, that's okay. But if you really want to focus on quality too, you really have to check them out and see if they are the right fit for you. Because just for the sake of going on a podcast interview and just, spending your time on another podcast interview, maybe it's not worth it because, time is money. And
I know. Ain't that the truth? And I've even looked at some and I'm just like, I don't know, that person rubs me the wrong way or their energy is too energetic for me. Like I don't know about you, but I do look at like their personality. I'm like, how am I going to connect with them?
Yeah.
Like I think would it be awkward? Would I feel uncomfortable? Would I feel inferior? I don't know. There's like to me, I'm like that little nuance does factor in.
Absolutely, 100%. Yes, you need that vibe between you two. Yes, I agree with you 100%. You definitely need that common vibe. Plus, when you have this conversation, it's like a human conversation, and if you're vibing and if you have like a good atmosphere, I think that's really important to have a great show and great interview.
Agreed. And sometimes they ask like the same questions in different episodes. So it's like you want to be prepared.
Yes,
So
you do.
I know. So let's segue into getting prepared. Besides knowing what their show is about, obviously, what do you teach your clients to do before the recording date?
They have to be ready and get their topics and talking points prepared, and that's really important. I always have my topics and talking points around me, even like cheat sheets. So it's like even I'm doing that like for years, but still it gives you a guidance what you will cover during an interview, and it's even a free flow conversation. You still need a kind of guidance to go through, and yeah, don't wing it. I mean, no one does that. So always prepare, and maybe just 10 minutes before the show, 15 minutes before the show, go over those questions, go over those topics, talking points that you really want to focus on during that interview, and just, be like, in centered and just be in that space and not just rushing from somewhere or sitting in a restaurant or in a crowded place or, some people like they are like airports and stuff. No, you need to have like a quiet space, your office, or just a quiet space in your home, and which is clean and there's nothing in the background that disturbs anyone. You need to be centered and at peace to start a conversation and just have that right vibe and right feeling about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you consider to be like a great guest, like a host raves about them? Like what qualities do you think they should have?
The prepared ones for sure. And who is respectful with the host time. They show up on time. They respectful with their attire, like they dress up a bit and they make a little bit of effort. You don't have to go over the top, but like be respectful. And also I think it's really important to not to treat the podcast interview as an advertisement, because it's not. That's absolutely fine when you wrote a book, but you don't have to tell the host like 100 times during the podcast interview that like that was in my book or whatever, because there's always a space and time for that. Usually at the end of the interview that you can, yes, now you can tell about your book, now you can tell about your website, social links, but don't treat it as an advertisement, because it's not. You share knowledge, you share story, and that's the most important angle of podcast guesting and podcast interviews. And the other very important thing is share the episode, tag the host when it's live, I think, and plus the reviews, obviously. I mean, you leave a 5-star review if you liked it. I mean, you don't have to like fake reviews or whatever. Like, just leave a review for the host after the interview. Send them a thank you note that like, whatever experience you had, just tell them. And then, yeah, please share, repurpose the content. I told my clients 100 times, reshare, repurpose,
I
and
know.
on all social media platforms, because that's so important. It's the best content creation strategy right now, and it's free for you. Obviously, like sometimes you pay for it, but then it's free and you can cut it up and you can make audiograms, videograms, quotes, anything, and just use it forever, basically.
Absolutely. Well, I'm all about repurposing because that's my thing.
I know.
Well, that's good that you're telling them to do that. Are there any questions that guests should ask the host ahead of time or even in the green room?
Yeah, sometimes especially if you're starting out and you're not like a very, very well seasoned podcast guest, ask them like maybe not in the green room, but before, maybe in an email, that like, do you have specific questions you want to cover? Or is it okay if we talk about this topic? Because I have like 3 topics, but I would love to talk about this one. So try to have just a very short conversation with the host, even before, like a day before, like just to be sure, especially when you're starting out and you're not so comfortable with that space. And they will help you. I mean, they are also people. I mean, they're human. So they will help you with that, because sometimes when you do a lot of podcast guesting, after a while, you can answer any questions and it won't really surprise you. But when you're starting out, and that's what I noticed, sometimes they ask you, so which topic am I going to talk about? And there are some hosts, it's like, oh, it's free flow conversation, we cover anything. And they are a bit scared because they didn't do that before. So yeah, if you're starting out podcast guesting, do send an email, ask them about what topic are we covering, because you want to be prepared and it's easier for both of you.
Agreed. There's nothing worse than being asked a question and you're like deer in the headlights.
Yes, I know.
I know. But it is true. Once you've been on like a ton of shows, you do get naturally asked like the same questions, or if something is asked that's out of the ordinary, you can just kind of go with the flow. But
yes,
I always say I'm an open book. Like you can ask me anything. So I know when you have a new client, you obviously prepare them and get things in order so that they have those foundational pieces to prepare them to go out in the world and guest on shows. What does that process look like, and what do you have them prepare?
Yeah, we have a 60-minute strategy call, which we usually call a coaching session, when a client signs up with us or signs up. And so that includes basically a very focused conversation about their topics, about their talking points, because if you're starting out again, you may not have those ready, and you don't even know where to start or what kind of topics you want to cover. So you really have to focus on those, because those are basically the base of a conversation. So it's really important. Then also the bio, because the bio is don't have to be too long, don't have to be too short, just in the middle, somewhere in the middle way. And some people, they have like a novel about themselves, but you don't really need that if you're starting out. Like we help them to create that short and sweet bio that you can use in the future. And also, if you have a call to action, if you have some kind of freebie, we decide on together which one to use or what to use, and give them some ideas what to do with them. And also, if you don't have a one sheet or a one pager, it's also important for podcast guests. We help them. We make a one sheet for them, which they can use in the future as well. Even when they're not with us, or whatever happens, they can still use that.
What makes good topics, do you think? And should we have more than one?
Yes, definitely. More than one. We always do three topics and a
Yeah,
couple of talking points each, because then you can choose from. It's just easier, and they have to stand out a bit. They have to be unique and not too generic. Because if you talk about marketing, it's like, okay, like, online marketing. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but that's very generic. You really
agreed.
have to dig deep into, like, in those talking points, what kind of marketing strategy you are covering. Or like for mine, I have, like, identify relevant podcasts or craft a compelling pitch. So they have to be a bit unique, and they have to grab the attention of the
Mhm.
host, because I know the hosts are busy and they're getting like hundreds of emails every day, and people want to be on their podcast. So you have to stand out, and you have to be original, and again, respectful
Yeah.
and kind.
I agree. I know when I get pitched and some of the topics are like my entrepreneurial journey or
Hmm.
why I got into podcasting or like that's so general. And besides the fact
Yeah.
that my podcast is not like a storytelling kind of a podcast, but
Yeah.
yeah, I like to know, I'm very logistical. So I like to know what is the topic? What are some of the questions that I can ask so that I can picture what the conversation is going to
Right.
be like? And I'm like, oh, those tips are relevant for my audience. I think it really helps paint a picture for the host.
Yes, absolutely. It's important. Just have to figure out the right ones, and they have to be compelling for sure, and to
Yeah.
stand out a bit.
I love that you help them as well. Obviously, your talking topics and your questions, but even like what lead magnet or resource that you're
Mm,
going to share. A, for me, it has to make sense, like a natural segue. Oh, I learned about this. Now I need this. It's like the natural next step.
yeah,
And plus, you want it to, you want to grow your list, but it also has to make sense for your business. So, yeah, that's awesome that you do that.
it's important. Yeah, and we work with so many different clients with so many different niches, and yeah, they can have a huge variety of
I know.
freebies or lead magnets. So yeah, it's important for sure.
What do you think is some of the biggest mistakes that guests make?
Not showing up on anything.
Oh
I
my
think that's the
God.
biggest. Yes. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot with our clients. It happens once or twice, and some of the hosts get very angry with them and upset, and then they don't want them again on their show.
I
So
know.
it happened. Not, I mean, say, like, I would say it's very, very rare that happen, because if I know, like, a client is, they are very busy, and sometimes I send them a reminder, it's like, it's coming up. Just a kind
Yes.
reminder, or a friendly reminder. Not showing up, not being respectful, that everything and the opposite of what I said, like, and not treating the host with respect, and just focusing on themselves. And the other thing, what I found disrespectful when it comes to podcast guesting and during an interview, when you do a monologue, and the podcast host is sitting there and waiting for you to finish, but you don't. You just go on and on. And I think you really have to find that balance. I think in life is the middle way is the best way. So
Yeah.
if you can find that balance between the host and the guest, and that kind of 50-50%, and you aim for that, I think it's great. But sometimes hosts do that too. And that can be a
Been
problem
there.
as well. Yes, me too. Yes.
Right? Like to me, it's a conversation, right? It should
Yes.
be back and forth.
Mm.
So do you coach your clients as well on some of those like do's and don'ts and or do you like just kind of like judge on some of the past shows that they've been on or just curious?
Sometimes I do, especially if they're starting out. Sometimes we do mock interviews, and we can
Oh,
talk through
nice.
it. So you just do it. And like, I had this client, and he was just really nervous on getting shows. I don't know why. I mean, he was a natural, but he wanted to have a mock interview. So, okay, let's do it. So we, recorded on a Zoom. I sent it to him, and I told him, and then we talked it through, and he figured out, like, and it gave him so much more confidence
Mhm.
after that mock interview, that, like, oh my gosh, now I can do lives, and I can go on the show, because he got that kind of push, like, yes, you can do it. Most of us can do it. Obviously, you need practice, like with
Yeah.
everything else. But yeah, we try to coach them and listen back to their interviews. And if something is not really right, we try to coach them into the right direction and give some advice. And I'm always happy to have positive or negative feedback from the hosts. And many times, especially if it's a new client on board, we ask them, how was the interview? Did you, any feedback appreciated? Any kind of feedback, and they are honest, and I love that.
Yeah.
And it helped us to coach the clients too, because obviously I can't listen to every single episode that they're doing, but the hosts are like pretty straightforward with that. Like if something's not right, they will tell me.
Yes.
It's good.
Agreed. And as a guest, I mean, it is like hearing yourself, like it's just irky, but
Sometimes, yeah. Or
it's like,
watching yourself, it's
I
your
know. Oh, it's the worst. But it's like even listening to the shows that I've been on and I create the reels and square videos or whatever, it's like I notice there's certain words that I say over and over or the ums and
Mm,
ahs. And I'm like, just being aware. And so it's like, okay, slow down the pace, stop
mm,
the ums and ahs. It is hard to do, but I
yeah.
think the more you're aware of those, I don't know, linguistic ticks, I don't know what you want to call them, then it helps you improve for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's good to watch back your interviews, because I remember so well when I started podcast guesting that I made those very funny faces. And oh my gosh, what am I doing there? And then it's like you really have to, focus on your body language too, because it tells a lot to other people. So you have to work in that and be in a good mood, and just feel that, like, forget the real world, forget that your kid is screaming downstairs or anything else, or like work related problem or whatever. You just try to be in the zone and try to focus on that single conversation, because it will stay there forever. So it's important to
Mhm.
keep that. Yeah, great.
I know. Isn't that the truth? um and you were mentioning that when the show is recorded, like it doesn't stop there. So I know you touched upon obviously promoting the episode once it goes live. But is there anything else that we should do? Do we need to follow up with the host or what do you recommend?
I always tell my clients that the podcast interview is just the beginning. And
Mm,
some people think that, okay, I done 10 interviews. Now, where is the business coming from now? It's like, where are the
yeah.
leads? And, where are my new clients? And sometimes I ask them, so did you follow up with the host? Did you send them a thank you note? Did you say thank you or whatever? And then just follow up with them. And I heard actually a very good idea from one of the podcast hosts. I had a chat from Ireland the other day, and he mentioned that, like, he does a post call with guests. So
Oh,
which I never like heard about it. And it's like, okay, so what's that? So we just have like a friendly conversation, and how we can work together, how we can help each other, how we can support each other. There's not a sales pitch from the host point of view, but it's just seriously how to help each other. Maybe you can end up in each other's master classes. Maybe you can join each other private Facebook groups or do a podcast swap or whatever. Because sometimes when you finish an interview, everything is just so fast. And it's
yeah.
like, okay, I'm just getting on the next call and the host is
Hmm.
busy. And we don't really have time just to wind down and just to have a little bit like a chat, how we felt about the podcast. Maybe we give some feedback and then figure out how we can help each other. And I'm also like, this is a shout out if I can do it, but I'm part of Bob Berg's Go Giver community,
Oh,
and I love his
yeah.
book. And
I
it's
love him.
always about like how we can help each other, and that's just so important. And it's not necessarily getting business out of each other all the time when you have an interview, but you never know what will happen. You may have a friend, you may have a business partner. I was hired on the spot many times when I was a guest on other people's podcasts because they wanted to work with me. But yeah, just take your time, and maybe it's like an extra 10 minutes, but I really like the idea of post calls. I mean, I never heard about it before,
Me
but
neither.
it does make sense, I think.
Agreed, especially if there's synergy or you're in the same space. And
Yeah,
there are different ways to collaborate that don't feel transactional. It's like
yeah,
I did a live Facebook with another girl. I've done a lead magnet swap with someone, like, or even like introductions, like who else do you want
yeah.
to have on your show? Or what other shows would you like to be on? Maybe I
Mm.
can connect you with someone. It could be as simple as that. But you're right. And I've never thought of having the call afterwards, but I kind of like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for giving us some great tips on how to be a better guest, how to prepare. And yeah, it's more than just showing up on an episode and talk. It's important and to be able to get more ROI out of it as well. And also that human connection. It's,
Yes,
you
it's
know, that's the best
important.
part.
It is. I love talking to people. I love networking with
Too.
people, and I just enjoy every conversation I have.
Yeah, me too. It's fun. So how can people find out about your agency?
Yeah, here comes the ad part. Yeah, that we talked about.
Yes.
So you can visit our website, which is podcastconnections, plural.co, not com. And you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'm there and I'm very active.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah,
are.
these are the two places that, yeah, you can find me
Yeah.
and get in touch with me.
Well, I'm so glad we've met. And your name is so pretty. And you are very active on
Thank you.
LinkedIn, which I love. Always seeing your posts. So definitely recommend connecting with you there for sure. Yeah, so nice meeting you. And I appreciate all your insights.
Thank you, Lindsay, for having me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. Well, till next week, folks, we'll see you on the Leverage Your Podcast show.